Hey, everybody out there. A few nights ago, you might remember, we were talking about the recent Trump-Harris debate and also about aliens among us. Now, we did have some audio problems, but we were able to save the rest of the show, which you are about to see and hear this time clearly. Now, we'll be picking it up with Bob Spearing of MUFON, talking about his belief that Elon Musk was involved in time travel. Now, that's because back in 1949, German rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, who developed the V-2 during the Second World War and later the Saturn rocket that took our astronauts to the moon, well, he wrote a book back in 1949 called Project Mars, and in it, Earthlings have colonized Mars, and the leader of the government that they form on that planet is called the Elon. Pretty interesting, isn't it, considering the fact that Elon Musk's next big project is sending humans to Mars to colonize that planet. Now, also interesting is Scranton's Bob Bolus talking about alien bodies seen by his mother many years ago in a hospital morgue in Scranton, later whisked away by the military, and how he himself was later followed by a UFO while piloting his private plane. Want to hear more about all of this? I do. Well, here we go. So I'm trying to sort this out now. So time travel, Werner von Braun predicted Elon Musk. So who did the time traveling?
That's an interesting question. I've thought of that myself too. I believe they've met, all right, and I believe it was Elon Musk going into the past. The problem with time travel, as you probably know, is when was the time travel machine built? Okay, because right now with our science, if you build a time machine today, you can only go forward and then back to today when the machine was built. So had the Nazis with Die Glock, the Bell, invented a time travel machine during World War II? If so, that would mean that time travel back and forth between as early as 1943 and today would be possible. And the question becomes, who has the time machine now?
You know, I'm going to bring in Bob Bolus again because there's so many reports of pilots and other policemen, trained observers seeing something. A lot of it is on both visual and radar. So something is there. And Bob, who's a pilot, has actually had an experience like that. Tell us about that, Bob.
Well, first off, before I get to that, when I was a young child, my mother had been a nursing student, I think at the former Hahnemann Hospital or whatever it was in Scranton. And there were 7 bodies brought in. They were green in color, put in the morgue down there. And she had witnessed all this when they took the covers off them and everything else and were examining them. She was a nursing student at that time. And she said then later on, they were doing this, the military soldiers came in and removed the 7 bodies. Now, my mother said this to the day she passed away, God bless her, that nobody knew who it was or what it was, but they were not from this planet or this world.
Bob,
And
Bob, excuse me. Have you ever heard a report like that out of Scranton?
Oh, yes and no. That's very interesting because there was an alleged crash in Pennsylvania back in the day, like probably around your mother's time. I don't know where it was. I thought it was closer. It was, and I'm not talking about Kecksburg in 1965. There was another one. Now you've intrigued me. I'd like to talk to you after the show if I could get your contact information, and I'd like to delve into this deeper. And maybe we could come back if we find something and discuss it again. But Bob, that's a really, really interesting story because Leonard Stringfield, who was probably the best crash retrieval researcher, who operated from the 50s to the 90s, put out 7 booklets on crash retrievals. And I have all the books. I'd like to go through them to see if any of them match your tale. But the story is almost getting old at this point. The United States government gets dead bodies, brings them to Wright-Patterson it's actually Building 18, not Hangar 18, and it stores them in some underground bunker called the Blue Room. So there's a lot of interesting stories, Bob, and you are not telling me anything that is far-fetched by any stretch of the imagination.
It gets better. It's going to get better now for you, my friend. I've been a pilot since the early 70s. And, a private pilot. I did some commercial out of Opelika to Florida to Colombia, Jamaica, and stuff like that. And then I flew my own aircraft all over the country. A friend of mine, I had a meeting outside of Albany, New York. And a friend of mine, Bob Egan, who was also a pilot, him and I used to bounce here and go to Allentown for a cup of coffee. And I had to go up there, so I said, "You want to go tonight? I'm flying up there." So he said, "Yeah." He used to be the editor for the classified section of the former Scranton Tribune. And we took off, flew up there. We had the meeting, and we left. It was a super, super clear night, the kind of night you like to fly in. And as you know, when you're up in that area, you're experiencing aircraft going in out of LaGuardia, Kennedy, and Newark. And at night, lights travel. When you're in the air flying and you see a landing light, it could be 50 miles away from you and you'll still reflect. So I always fly, especially VFR. It was a super night, so I didn't have to do instrument. And when I took off, I immediately went to New York Center and asked for advisories, which I always do to be safe, that an aircraft might be coming, you'll never see it, but at least you'll know who's out there by being on advisories. So I took off, gave them my aircraft number, I ident it, so I blew up on the screen, they know where I was. Now I'm heading back here to Scranton, and we're flying, I'd say maybe over by Port Jervis, up in that area, Newburgh, Port Jervis. And I asked for advisories. They said, "You're clear of traffic." And I'm flying along, and a light is up behind me, coming up. And I thought it was just the reflection of another jet flying somewhere with the landing light. So I asked Egan, I said, "Hey, look out, see if you can see what's out there." We looked, we didn't see it. It was just a light, a bright light. So I called New York Center again, gave them my number, asked for anything on advisories in my area, and they said no. Well, this light kept coming and coming, and now it's off my right quartering till, and it was getting brighter and brighter. I went back to New York Center, said, "I have traffic off my right quarter, please advise." They said, "Sir, there's no traffic in your area." We're flying along, and the next thing, this thing is getting closer and closer. Then all of a sudden, it's off my right wing, flying right along with me, and it lit up the cockpit of the aircraft like, I can't even put it in words. We were just lit right up. Scaring the living hell. I get back on the radio, said, "New York Center, I have traffic off my right wing. Please advise what the hell's going on." He came back to me and said, "Sir, again, there is no traffic in your area." I said, "You tell me what the hell is out here." He goes, "Sir, you're leaving our area. Contact Wilkes-Barre Center." That's what Wilkes-Barre handled the traffic. So I go back on, I go Wilkes-Barre Center, 59 Tango, with you, ident, boom, I blew up, hit the ident button. He goes, 59 Tango, we have you, traffic, etc. Turns around, and I said, "I have traffic off my right wing. Please advise." He goes, "Sir, there is no traffic." He goes, 59 Tango, again, there's no traffic around you. Within about 10 minutes, this thing's flying alongside of me. All of a sudden, it's directly in front of me. I go to Wilkes-Barre Center. I go, "Wilkes-Barre Center, 59 taken, take an emergency anti-collision that I'm doing." And I dove the airplane. When I pulled up, now I dropped down from about 9,500 feet down to about 3,500, somewhere in that area. And I pulled the aircraft up. It was directly in front of me. Now I'm flying along at about 170, 180 miles an hour. And I go to New York Center, and believe me, I was scared. So was Egan. I go, "Wilkes-Barre Center, please advise. I got traffic again in front of me. Damn it, tell me what's going on." I said, "Sir, 59 Tango, there's no traffic." I've said, "I'm taking evasive action again. I cut the plane to the left to avoid it, cut back to the right, and it was right there in front of me. I said, I'm taking evasive action. This damn thing is in front of me. 5-9 Tegel, there is no, I said, don't tell me there's none, there's something out here. And the next thing, all of a sudden, like a snap of the finger, it was gone.
Now, Bob, those stories are not unique, are they?
No, they are not. One of our most famous cases in the MUFON database took place in March of 2019. A FedEx plane carrying alleged auto parts from a Ford plant in Mexico City to Tennessee was nearing Monterrey. They were hugging the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. It was late at night, and a yellowish orb, glowing ball of plasma, came down on the co-pilot side and began accompanying them at about 500 miles per hour for 33 minutes. When it reached the United States border at Reynosa, Mexico, it made an abrupt right turn after turning purple and shooting away. All right. So the theory is, and I'm not quite sure, Bob, if you considered it like an orb or a glowing ball of plasma or whatever it was, or a craft, but in this particular case, 2019, the prevailing theory was that it was an actual spherical craft, came down to surveil the FedEx plane. Perhaps it wasn't really carrying auto parts, and the reason it was wrapped in plasma, which is becoming known in news stories this year especially, is that plasma absorbs radar signals. What the pilot did was he turned off his cockpit lights, aimed his cell phone camera at the object outside his cockpit window, filmed it for 4 minutes, and then panned down to his TCAS anti-collision radar screen, and there was nothing there. The object was absorbing the radar signal. It was invisible. United States fighter jets, F-35s and Raptors, right now are experimenting with shooting a plasma field in front of the plane. So if they were, say, going to take out some sort of missile array in Iran, the plasma would block the radar of the missile array from seeing the plane coming in. So who already has this technology that we're trying to develop now?
You know, that's interesting, Bob, because when Bob Bowes first told me that story, he said that the tower was telling there's nothing on radar. I suspected that they didn't want to admit that there was a UFO because, you know, earlier on, they didn't want pilots to report it, and they squelched that stuff. So I thought that maybe it was on radar, but they weren't admitting to it. But what you just said puts a new light on it.
Yeah, I don't think they would intentionally try to hide something in front of Bob's plane, because that could end in disaster. So I don't think they were intentionally, misleading Bob. I believe that there's either two possibilities, and Bob should know this second one. It's either A, it was some sort of craft wrapped in plasma becoming invisible to radar, or it was some sort of unknown craft that had no transponder, which is why it wasn't showing up at the air. No.
No, let me tell you, if it was an unidentified air, I would have hit him head on. Whether he had a transponder or not, I was on a collision course with that object that was nothing but a bright light, and at 180, 170, 80 miles an hour, I would have hit him head on if I didn't take the evasive action and dove the aircraft. I felt I would have hit him head on. When I pulled up, the aircraft was right in front of me, and there's no way in heck a normal aircraft would be in that condition or position, stationary, and just be in front of me after I dropped 4,000 feet.
How big do you think it was in diameter, and how close did it actually get to your plane? What was the closest it got to your plane?
I'd say maybe 100 feet, 200 feet before I dove the aircraft.
And how big do you think it might have been?
I couldn't tell. I was blinded. It was a blinding light. But let me take you a step in your research, and it's well documented in the Scranton area. I was coming up Kaiser Avenue here in Scranton, and I saw this object with the lights going around, different colored lights. I said, what the heck is that? I thought at first it was just a radio tower. They had the, like an amber, not amber, but like a reddish colored light on them on the towers then. And I thought it was that. All of a sudden it's moving. I go up the Scranton Carbondale Highway. Now it's off my right side. I'm watching it go up the valley. This was well documented by the state police, by local authorities up in the Archibald, Jessup, Oliphant, Troop area. Everybody saw this object, and it's well documented. You do your research. saw this thing going. I couldn't believe what it was. I got off the Casey, went down, going toward, how would I put it? Not Carbondale, but up toward Mayfield, up in that direction where I was going to head around and go to the airport and get my plane and see what it was. I'm heading back down the backside now, coming down from through Jessup and everything. Can still see the object. And I'm heading down. All of a sudden, it was like a streak and it was gone. And it was well documented. Your research will show that. And if there's any way, and I doubt if it's possible now, all the years from my incident, was well recorded at Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, when they were taking traffic advisories way back then. A New York Center had it when I kept questioning about an unidentified object flying behind me and all of a sudden on the right of me. And then when I transferred to Wilkes-Barre Center from New York Center, it was directly in front of me.
You know, I want to bring Rack in here now, because Rack has an interesting take on what the aliens are, and some people just dismiss it as real crazy conspiracy stuff. But let's see what Bob's reaction is. Now, Rack, we're talking about. Tell the folks what you think the aliens are.
Well, let me first, unfortunately, say that I believe we lost a lot of our audio for the first little bit of the show. I don't think our audio was being broadcast all the way up until Bob Spearing came in, and then the audio was fixed, and then I had to get out as producer because I was getting too much feedback. I couldn't do both the show and the producer thing, so I had to drop from your computer in order to do the show. But I think we might have lost the beginning part of the show audio-wise. Not you, but Bob Bolus and myself were probably not recorded and broadcast live. There is a little bit of that audio that I might be able to augment in post-production, but up until Bob Spearing came in, I think we lost our audio for the live broadcast.
All right, well, we're going to have Nikki back on and do another show tomorrow night, so we could regroup if we have to. But now, Rack, your theory on what the aliens are, very interesting.
Bob kind of touched on it in his own way, even though the audio wasn't being broadcast. He was kind of alluding to that there's a good and evil aspect to the political race. And I believe when you were, well, I was there with you when you introduced or interviewed Bob Spearing, he said, ultimately, you asked him, ultimately, what do you think this is all for? What is this, the end of this? And I said, the New World Order. And, or he said the New World Order. But he goes right along with what my thinking is. This is basically, it comes down to a battle between good and evil. They've been here for thousands of years. I'm going to tell you just the way I think it is. And I'll tell you that there's a lot of support to back me up. Basically, the Bible is true. God exists, Satan exists, and there's been this struggle between good and evil since time began, at least on Earth. As far as this idea of aliens being from other planets, possibly. I'll give that a possible. But basically, even Bob Spearing said it, interdimensionality. Interdimensionality is just a different way of saying, you know, we're here on Earth in the 3 dimensions. There's other dimensions that maybe, as the higher up you go with the other dimensions, you may be getting closer to heaven, quote unquote. So there's a interdimensionality. There's a good versus evil. Basically, I think the aliens are basically not aliens in the sense that they come from a different world, but they are evil entities. And they are interacting with the powers of Earth to take control, ultimately for Satan in that whole apocalyptic vision.
Fallen angels, Mike. Rack,
Fallen
you
angels,
said
they've been talked about in the Bible. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 is when they kind of start really hitting into it. And they talk about the angels, fallen angels that came down and made it with earth women, gave offspring to giants. Now people are going to be saying, well, whoa, wait a minute. Giants, angels? But when you look at, if you do a research and you type in newspapers, skeletons, giants, remains, and then take out football and baseball, otherwise you're going to get returns of football and baseball giants, you will see that there's a lot of news articles bringing up the digging up of giant skeletons. So, I mean, there is indications that that history is true, and I think that's what we're dealing with now. And don't forget, Eisenhower supposedly met with these beings. Supposedly there's a picture of them. I don't know if that picture's accurate or not, but I wouldn't doubt there's some sort of a technology swap, a control swap, a power swap being done with these other entities for Earth.
Okay, so Bob Spearing, fallen angels?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a biblical component to it. Yeah, I believe that this is one of my theories. Let's say, there's the rapture, there's the tribulation, the Christ comes back, has 1,000-year reign. The one thing I never figured out in the Bible was why at the end of the 1,000-year reign did they let the devil back out again? Now, 1,000 years from now, the technology is going to be much, much better. It's going to be like magic to us today. If I'm Satan and I just got let loose, but I know that sooner or later I'm going to end up in hell after the Battle of Armageddon, and I ain't ever come back, I'm going to find all the smartest, most evil people in the world, build a time machine, go back and try to flip the entire timeline just so that the Christ can't come in the first place. So that's one of my theories. I do believe there's a biblical component to it, definitely.
How about giants in the earth?
It is absolutely true that they have found records of the Native American Indians in the Midwest fighting red-haired giants. They have found skeletons that are 10 to 12 feet tall, like the Nephilim, in mid-America, in Indian burial mounds. It is without doubt that if you go to newspapers.com, you can find those pictures and articles about those skeletons that were sent to the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian denies it and says it's a hoax today. And I mean, nothing is out of the realm of possibility, because yellow journalism 130, 40 years ago was pretty,
right,
eccentric. But I think that there's enough evidence in the historical record to suggest that there were giants in middle America.
Well, Rack, you'll remember we interviewed Dr. Jacobs. What was his first name? David Jacobs? Was it?
David M. Jacobs.
Yeah, and he, as a matter of fact, I think I did one of his last public interviews because he was alien. But anyway, he maintains that there were no UFO crashes because their technology is so superior, they don't crash.
But what if it was human technology from the future that still has kinks in it, just like, our Boeing Starliners having kinks today? All right. If you came from another galaxy, you probably ain't going to crash when you get to Earth. But if, say, you're from our timeline, but just maybe 1,000 years in the future, I still think that, your object can crash.
You mentioned earlier, Bob Spearing, that there's already scientists have already developed a machine that you can move forward in, but not backwards.
The easy part of time travel is moving forward. The faster you go towards the speed of light, the further you go. You know that.
So time slows down, right.
Yeah, we don't have the technology that we know of. I think we might, but the principle we know. It's going backwards. That's the hard part. Okay, so in theory, we know how to go forward. As a matter of fact, I forget who the scientist was. It may have been Mikio. I can't pronounce his name.
Mikio Kachu.
Yeah, just last week he said we already know how to build the technology to time travel. We just don't know how to do the power source, because it would require a lot of energy to be able to do it. So he pretty much admitted it. Eric Davis is a physicist who works with that cabal of Lou Elizondo and Robert Bigelow and those, and he basically came up with the concept that mathematically you could go from one end of the universe instantly if you know how to bend space-time.
Yeah, Bob,
Larry,
go ahead.
There's this idea of a twin paradox, which is what they call a stumbling block for reverse time travel, going backwards in time, where if you happen to go back in time and then kill your great-grandparents so that they couldn't reproduce,
right,
then how did you get here in order to go back in time? But the counter theory to that, at least from my perspective, is the multiple dimensions universe aspect. In other words, every decision, anytime anybody makes a decision, you're driving down the road, you come to a T. You can either go right or left. Well, if you go right, then you're going right in this universe. But instantly, another universe is spawned off of that where you go left. So there's an infinite number of universes. So if you do go back in time to kill your grandparents, then only in your timeline is that happening. But yet there's other timelines where your grandparents did have you that made you to go back and it's very strange.
I heard that with the example of 9/11. If somebody went back in time and stopped 9/11 from happening, it would bifurcate the timeline. So in one universe, 9/11 would always happen, but there'd be a split in another universe, 9/11 would be averted.
You know what I find interesting is up until recently, any UFO story carried by the mainstream media was with tongue-in-cheek smirks, this and that. Now, even mainstream media is presenting these stories in a more serious vein. Now, is this part of the government operation of eventual disclosure? I mean, I've been a journalist for decades, and I see a distinct difference now. I mean, when I first started in business, if you present a UFO story, you'd have to do it, tongue-in-cheek. Now they're presenting it in a serious manner. So why is that going on, Bob?
Let me jump in before Bob answers. There's this idea of Project Bluebeam, this fake alien invasion to usher in the New World Order type of situation.
Braun.
And for Bob, what is with the word blue? Project Bluebeam, Project Blue Book, Project Have Blue. It's just an endless series of these blues. Have Blue, Blue Beam, Blue Book.
The blue room at Wright-Patterson.
Yeah, it's everywhere. They just love to connect the word blue with anything UFO alien type related.
Mm-hmm. Do you know that the root of the word Krishna and the word Christ means blue?
Really?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Here's something else along these lines. Now, Bob Boas, you run a trucking operation very successfully. You've been, grounded, so to speak, much grounded on Earth. And before you had that encounter yourself with a UFO following you, would everything we're discussing seem way out there, seem ridiculous, seem like nutcase stuff? And was there that transformation, or did you always think it might be so even before you had that experience as a pilot?
I always believe there's UFOs out there. I believe there's beings from another, based on what my mother had told us as children, that what she had experienced, and they came from somewhere else. The military had them. But for Bob Spearing, what I'm going to do is try and look back from one of my old log books, because as you know, as a pilot, we always recorded everything in our logs, whether it was VFR, IFR, whatever. I always carry my log. I'm going to look back and see if I can find my old log book that I had back then, and I can give you the exact date that this took place.
Okay, I have access to almost 1 million UFO reports spanning hundreds of years, most of them after 1947, from like 7 different databases. So if anybody else recorded your event and you could give me an exact date, chances are I might be able to find it. I'm also very interested in the 7 bodies in the hospital in Scranton. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. And I mean, your mother wasn't, anybody that was way out there, and she's telling you this. So, I mean, how contained was that story? This is the first time I've heard of it.
Me too.
Bob, how,
It is.
was it kept close to the vest? Nobody was talking about it?
Bob?
Yeah, it was about a vehicle. She had said that it was about something that had crashed, and they brought the bodies there in the hospital, and she was a nurse for most of her life. I mean, she was a head nurse at the Mercy Hospital. So there was credibility in what she had to say. And when she went to the grave, she never once reiterated and said, no, that was not true.
Now, did she see the bodies, or just heard others talk about it?
She saw them, and other students and nurses and doctors that were there all saw them, and they were sworn to secrecy.
Wow.
And the government took them.
Do you know what year this might have been? Do you have a ballpark for the year?
No, she just said that they were like green people.
No, like what year? What year might it have happened in? How old was
That
she?
was it.
No,
Oh, so this,
what year? What year, Bob?
It's a long time ago,
I mean,
probably,
approximately. You were how old?
probably 7, 8 years old.
All right,
I'm
Mother.
81 now,
so that would make it 70 some years ago.
at least.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could. Yeah, maybe you guys could get together and really trace it down. I
yep,
mean,
yep.
this is an amazing revelation.
Well,
Never.
if you would share my cell phone number with
Yeah.
Yes,
Robert
please.
there,
I'll talk to you.
I'd
Definitely.
definitely love to have dialogue
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
Because you know we have the Roswell incident where
Right.
they ordered little coffins from the local undertaker. There's a story that in Colorado there were also little coffins that were actually stored till the government took them away. So this isn't a unique story. And if it's a pattern, the circumstantial evidence suggests that the more circumstantial evidence you get, the more this is probably true.
But
What's
Bob,
going on?
there's reports that they don't look human. So how does that relate to your belief that they're actually humans from the future if they don't look like us at all?
Okay, I have three theories on that. When you have these bedroom encounters, that they may just be projections and not actually solid at all. I know a person who actually worked at Area 51, and they told me that they were plant-based. Okay, that's why they have no anuses, no belly buttons, whatever. They're basically grown and they're intelligent. And the third theory is that they may be genetically altered from a future Earth, and they're used as literally slaves to do certain, tasks.
How about the theory? And I'm kind of very interested in this myself. That Mars once did have intelligent life until something catastrophic happened to it. Because at one point it was very Earth-like, and there's that picture of the face on Mars that NASA quickly poo-pooed. But to me, because of the symmetry, it's fairly convincing that it's an
Hmm.
artificial construction. What do you think?
There's,
What do you think,
there's
Bob?
Well, yeah. There's also near that face is
Sidonian.
yes, with the pyramid-shaped objects. But here's the most. I think there's life on Mars now. All right, and I don't think it's microbes. The one of the rovers took a series of pictures over several hours. This is going back 10 years, and you actually see the rock moving behind other rocks and coming out over a period of hours, and the camera was in the same place. There's no such thing as a moving rock. Okay, so I definitely believe that there's life on Mars now. When you look at those, do you ever see those tubes that seem to be sticking out of the surface of Mars? It's almost like air vents or
Yeah, yeah.
subway that I find really unlikely being some sort of natural formation. Could be lava tubes, I don't know, but it's very visually interesting.
Yeah, there's all kinds of pictures that are very reminiscent of artificial constructions,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
NASA just says it's tricks of your eye, tricks of light, this and that. But if anybody researches this, you go on Mars anomaly sites, and when you see the pictures, it really gets you thinking. Can this really be a natural formation?
Mhm.
It's not just a face on Mars; it's other things that you were talking about,
Mhm.
pyramid shapes and all sorts of things.
Look, the
And
goal is to keep everybody stupid as possible, Larry.
yes,
Uh,
we're getting stupider.
yeah, well, yeah, a de-evolution.
Yeah.
I don't quite go for evolution, but I can guarantee that de-evolution seems to be happening. But this idea of the JFK assassination, when they came out with the CIA dispatch 1035-960, which demonized the phrase conspiracy theorist, they've used that for basically everything. Look into UFOs. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're nutbag. Oh, look into aliens. Oh, same thing. So they keep everybody away from topics they don't want them looking into. So what's the motivation behind this? I believe there is a nefarious aspect of what's going on with the world, and they don't want people to figure it out because they're getting further and further along with their plans, and they don't want anything disrupting that until they can get the lockdown grid that they want.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll tell you, if the Book of Revelations isn't scary enough for you, just read a Jim Marrs book about what's going on with it. I mean, he's got everything linked together conspiracy-wise. I closed that book when I read it. I was like, wow, it like blew my mind what he thinks is going on.
Because it is connected. When you look at it from an aspect of things being connected, politics, the New World Order, why did it keep this secret? Why did it keep that? It seems to have this connection with the good versus evil aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's something. Armageddon in Revelations. There is actually a settlement in northern Israel by the name of Mageddon. And it is in that kind of location.
It's a mountain in that region. Megiddo is a mountain in that region. Har, I believe, means mountain.
Yeah, it's a mound. That's why it was named that, but it's an actual place name. And it's also in an area where if there are invading armies, as depicted in the Revelations, all the armies of the world, that is a place where they would converge. So when you go through Revelations and compare it to world events today, it is rather uncanny, to say the least.
Larry, there is this thing that we already spoke about, giants. Now, you ask any person on the street about giants, they'll think you're whacked. But giants, if you look at, like in the newspapers, there seems to be this trace of giant skeletons being found. There is a place in, I forget where, Arizona type thing. It's called Newspaper Rock. And on Newspaper Rock, they have petroglyphs of feet showing 6 toes, 6 fingers, which goes back to the biblical record of the giant, Goliath. 6 fingers, 6 toes, a giant. So there's this thing about giants. They found Sodom and Gomorrah. They found cities that they think are Sodom and Gomorrah. They have burnt marks on top of all the buildings. And they found nodules of pure sulfur laying all over the place. Now, another name for sulfur is brimstone. So when you read the biblical aspect of Sodom and Gomorrah, fire and brimstone, rain from the sky, the buildings burned, etc., they found those cities. They found supposedly Noah's Ark. I forget the guy's name, Wyatt or Ron Wyatt. Ron Wyatt, I believe is the guy's name. They have pictures from within inside the ark, beams and compartments and so forth. They found the rock that supposedly Moses split with his staff to allow water to pour out, and they found at the base of that whole area an altar that was made by Aaron. So they're finding archaeological evidence of kind of proving the Bible is true. Yet people just are clueless about all this.
Well, the problem is, it's so between government suppression and nutcase stories on the internet.
There is no nutcase. There's this theory.
What I'm saying is, you have a lot of nutcase stuff as well that's not credible. I'm not saying that what we're talking about isn't credible, but what I'm saying is, it's so confusing to a person that doesn't follow it closely. It's such a mishmash of credible and non-credible that it's hard for people to really figure out what's going on. Part of that probably is by design.
Yeah, I think it is by design. I think one of the major ones by design would be the flat Earth, put out by, I think the very first person that put anything out about that was a guy by the name of Mark Sargent. Now, was he really a sergeant? Was that a disinformation campaign to make people that believe in that, they also might believe in the New World Order or something, so now they're nutcases because they believe in flat Earth? I mean, there's a lot of disinformation, intentional, the word isn't disinformation, there's a lot of, I forget what the word is, but they're trying desperately to keep certain things hidden, and they'll put other goofy stuff out there just to keep the other stuff hidden.
Yeah, Bob, you were going to say something, Bob Sperian?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, did you ever hear of the philosophy of last Wednesdayism?
What is it again?
Last Wednesdayism.
No.
It's a theory that the Earth only started last Wednesday, and everything in our minds has been implanted as if we're in a matrix. So all of history is just in our mind, but the world came into existence last week. It's called Last Wednesdayism. But yeah, when you asked me to come on a show, I thought it was going to be on from 7:30 till 8. I had to go, but I wanted to tell you, I have to go, but I want to tell you a good time travel story, if you don't mind. Back in 570 AD, the Quran talks about the year of the elephant, and the king of Yemen had converted to Christianity, and Mecca was still pagan, and they would walk around the Kaaba, but there was no Islam. And the king of Yemen told Mecca, you need to convert or I'm going to raise Mecca to the ground and destroy the Kaaba. So this massive modern army for its time approaches Mecca, and this ragtag bunch of Meccans comes out, 1/3 the size of the approaching army, to defend Mecca. And then this miracle happens in the Quran, where these big black birds carrying stones in their mouth drop the stones on the advancing army and utterly destroy them. Later Islamic commentary talks about the skin on the soldiers' arms and legs and face falling off. So let's look at this story with 21st century eyes. Could birds with stones in their mouth defeat an entire army? No. But fighter jets from the 20th or 21st century dropping cluster bombs, radioactive cluster bombs that make the skin fall off of people, that would make more sense, especially when you consider what happened several months later in 570 AD. Muhammad was born in Mecca. I really believe modern fighter jets interfered with the timeline in order to ensure that Islam would come into existence.
Wow. Fascinating. Well, look, Bob, you've got to go, but what we'll do is I'll exchange numbers for both of you. You get together, and maybe in another few weeks after you compare notes, we could do an update on this.
Sure. If I can find something, I'll let you know, and I'll follow up on those 2 stories. They're great.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, thanks for being with us.
Larry, Bob, Rack, thank you very much. I got to hit the road before the store closes. I promised the wife. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll see you guys later. Thank you for having me on.
Okay.
Get off.
Bye now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap it up for this week. We're over time, but it was a fascinating discussion. And tomorrow night, for those who are listening, we'll be back with Nikki and do another show. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you found this interesting and informative. We try to do these every Thursday night at 7 o'clock, and we hope that the audience appreciates what we're trying to convey to the audience, and will join in. We have call-in numbers, and you can even come in on Zoom if you wish, but that's for the next show. So, guys, thanks for being with us.